Global Healing Network. I'm your host, Dr. Kamal Kokayi. And our guest today is a food person. This sister is really into food, understanding about food and disease, has educated me. Um, and I really appreciate her presence. And Samantha Bailey Kokayi is also married to my son. And she gives us all a hard time around food, but she has a lot of information to share with you today. And I'm going to start off by asking Samantha, I like to start with a case so that you guys don't run away. So we're going to talk a little bit about diabetes first. And, of course, that's an epidemic here in this country. And we need only walk down the block and look at the American gut, look at the American palate and what's being served up for dinner. So, Samantha, why don't you start wherever you want to start and just tell people, maybe I mentioned diabetes, but you might want to say something about your work, and then let's go into it.
So what I do is I teach people to eat for their health challenge or their health concern or a certain ailment. And when it comes to diabetes specifically, it is an epidemic in the United States. Since 1991 till today, the diagnosis rate has jumped 61%. That's 25 years. It jumped 61%. But type 2 diabetes is far more an environmental and food issue than it is a genetic issue. If we eat and live in a certain way, we don't have to have type 2 diabetes. So I do like to work with clients who have type 2 diabetes, and if they actually adhere to some of the advice and adjustments I give to their diet, I've had people call me 4 days later talking about how their resting blood sugar, once they wake up, was normal. And they hadn't seen these numbers in months. And it's just from 4 days of implementing certain changes. So.
Well, let's talk about it. Where are you seeing some of the problems? What happens? Let's give it away.
Sure. So one of the most common things that are advised to people who have type 2 diabetes is to stay away from sugar because it's a blood sugar issue, and even stay away from, let's say, starch or anything that breaks down into fructose or glucose. And this is what some people do adhere to, but no matter what, they still are diabetic the rest of their lives. And if they're on metformin, they stay on metformin. If they're on insulin, they stay on insulin. Nothing really reverses. But that's because we're treating it like we have to adjust our sugar. And the real issue is, why can't these sugar molecules get into our cells? And the reason why is because of dietary fat. So we all know, we're very well aware that with heart disease, there's a lot of clogging of the arteries, blockages, whether it's hardened cholesterol or fatty deposits. But this fatty deposit goes beyond just your arteries and your veins. It also coats the inside of your intestines, impeding absorption of nutrients, and it also coats individual cells. Now, in every cell, there is an insulin receptor that accepts the glucose into it to give it energy. But if that insulin receptor is coated with fat, doesn't matter how much insulin is in your body, you cannot get that sugar molecule in, and therefore you have elevated blood sugar. And the sugar remains in the bloodstream, damaging things in its path. So, one of the main things to do if you're diagnosed with type 2 diabetes is to lower your dietary fat intake. And most usually by taking out oil, taking out nuts, and taking out dairy, things like milk, cheese, yogurt, cream. You take out these high-fat foods, then your body can metabolize the excess fat that is within your system, within your veins, within your arteries, within your blood. And once you get some of that fat metabolized and out, all of a sudden,
How about fat in general? I mean, meat in general.
um, some nutrition doctors like Dr. Neil Barnard and Dr. John McDougall would say the meat has to go too. And I also agree. Even the leanest cut of meat, which is a chicken breast, is 23% calories from fat. So it's still not a low-fat food. When they advise their diabetic patients to change their diet, they take them off of meat and dairy completely. I do emphasize dairy and oil because oil is 100% fat, dairy is almost 100% fat, and nuts are very high in fat as well. But taking out the meat will help your case even more.
So that in a nutshell, if people learn how to organize their meals around those principles, their sugar will drop. And certainly we've seen that happen in people that choose to make those changes.
Absolutely.
How about, let's talk about cancer a bit.
Sure.
Obviously I share with my patients, if you're a male, hey, you got about a 50% chance of being told that you have cancer at some point in your life. If you're a female, it's about 1 in 3. So, and the Columbia University Public Health Department said that really 95% of cancers are environmental, meaning environmental cancer, chemicals, and the food that you eat. So let's talk about our diet and cancer.
Sure, absolutely. So outside of the air we breathe and the water we drink, which we don't really have too much control over, when it comes to our food, even recently, the Harvard Medical School has decided that meat is carcinogenic. They literally published it recently, I think this year, 2015. Also, processed foods. When I say processed, I mean things that are frozen, packaged in boxes, things like cold cereal, things like frozen dinners, things like cookies, baked goods that are on shelves, not freshly made at home. A lot of those things have preservatives so that they don't go bad on the shelf. Unfortunately, those preservatives do not break down well in our body. And now we have these renegade molecules causing damage. On top of that, things like processed sugar. So it could be something as blatant as candy, let's say lollipops, candy bars, or something a little bit more not as obvious, like having high fructose corn syrup in your bread. Even though it's brown bread and people might have it because they feel that it's healthier, it still has sugar most of the time. Sugar, when it's not attached to its own whole food, does a lot of damage to our body, including damaging cells and damaging DNA, which in turn becomes what we call cancer. And so one of my advice to eat to try to avoid cancer issues is to get off the sugar. I think that's number one more than anything else. Get off the processed sugar. Get off anything that has sugar as an ingredient, high fructose corn syrup as an ingredient, corn syrup as an ingredient, maltodextrin as an ingredient, dextrose. All these are sugar disguised in many different words. Get off of that. You can have your bread, just make sure there's no sugar in it. You can have your tomato sauce, but maybe make it at home. You can have your salad dressing still, but maybe you should make it at home versus buying an actual salad dressing, which usually has sugar in it.
We see any number of case reports where people with stage 4 cancers have actually been able to achieve a state of health just by changing their diet.
Yes.
Can cause a reversal.
Absolutely.
How much are you aware of people doing this kind of work and really working with people to make those kind of changes?
In my circles, I've been blessed to meet people who've had different types of cancer and have reversed them completely, nutritional and environmental. Not to say they only changed their food. Some of them moved to sunnier places, made sure, really,
right.
And made sure to get more fresh air, walk outside, meditate. But I know a woman in her teens who was diagnosed with a stage 3 brain tumor, had an operation, but did not go with surgery, with radiation or chemo, and just doused her body with green chlorophyll-rich vegetables, lots of raw foods, got off the processed foods, got off the chips, the fast food. She was a fast food eater, a typical standard American diet teenager who changed completely, and in a year and a half, her tumor was gone. Year and a half.
Well, that's what we want to hear. That's what we want to hear. So I guess we hit diabetes, we hit cancer. Let's talk about hypertension, cardiovascular disease.
Yes. So really, you may notice a common thread in a lot of things I say, because honestly, when you start changing your diet to more fresh fruits and vegetables, especially vegetables that have a lot of minerals, a lot of chlorophyll that will clean your blood, and reduce the dairy, reduce the meat, or even eliminate it, it's going to clear up more than just one thing. It doesn't just clear up the diabetes or even help people with cancer or tumors to mitigate their issue. It will also clear up cardiovascular disease and heart disease. So in America, by the time you're diagnosed with heart disease, it usually means you already had one heart attack. And most of us know that 50% of heart attacks end up being fatal. So if you even get the diagnosis of heart disease, you are one of the lucky ones, because some get that heart attack and they don't even live for the diagnosis. So now that you're diagnosed, there's basically like this 10-year window of when you're going to die. This is very normal in the United States once you're diagnosed with heart disease. Well, back in the 80s, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, who was this renowned cardiac doctor from the Cleveland Cardiac Clinic, he decided to change the diet of 18 end-stage heart disease clients. These are people who were basically bound to their bed because of crushing chest pain, who were just given the advice, be comfortable at home, the end is basically near. He took these individuals, radically changed their diet with the main principles of no oil, no meat whatsoever, no dairy whatsoever, 5 servings of green leafy vegetables a day. A day. Right. Morning, noon, night, and in between 5 servings. And he monitored them. He made them meet with each other every 6 weeks. He met with them every 2 months. He made sure they were changing their lifestyles with a little bit of moderate movement. Because with heart disease, it can be very hard to move around. And to this day, out of those 18 people in the 80s that he took on, they are all alive today. And that is amazing, considering heart disease as a diagnosis is like a 10-year death sentence.
You know, I just say to folks, are you tired of taking all the drugs? Are you tired of taking the drugs and still feeling sick? Are you tired of taking the drugs and you continue to get sicker and you have more drugs added? Well, you know, the dietary piece and, of course, how you deal with your emotions and quote-unquote stress, these are the 2 big areas. But what happens is that as we're talking, you see it comes back to the same dietary principles over and over. And you can choose to embrace them wholeheartedly. You can embrace them at least 80% and get 80% improvement. You know what I'm saying? You can embrace them 50%. But the answer and the solutions are really in your hands. So, Samantha, I want to thank you for just taking the time to share the being, you know, a part of my staff and the work that we're doing. And please share whatever contact information you would like to.
Absolutely. So if you'd like to reach me, you can find me on Facebook at Symbiotic Health. Also at the website symbiotichealth.nyc. And if you need to email me, you may use the email address sbailey0318@gmail.com.
Excellent. And I hope this has shed some light on your day and giving you, whoever's listening, some encouragement, if not for you, for somebody that you know. Take care and join us again. Blessings.